welcome. And it's only the second class, and it's already just right into the
brown nose. I thought Stuart was bad.
All right, well, welcome everybody. We'll call this Class 2, a continuation of the introduction to Kabbalah. So we'll start off tonight with a review of some of the topics that we talked about last week. We'll expand on a few of those topics, and then we'll continue with some related topics that we kind of need to establish a basis for Kabbalah. Yeah, Fran.
Can I record it?
Sure.
Thank you. There you go.
You missed a good
And I'm also recording. So if anybody wants last week's class, I should be able to
That would be good.
find some way to send it. I'm not sure how.
Email it to me if you don't mind.
Okay. Let me find out if maybe there's a way to post on the website, or if I can post on our website.
There's a way to post it on the website. I no longer know how.
Okay.
But I'll tell you who does. I mean, who's the first desk is Rabbi Anderson.
Okay. I'll speak to Rabbi Anderson.
Unless City Nancy has
Sure.
answers.
Okay. So last week we talked about the idea that the word Kabbalah means to receive, and the idea of receiving is that our lives prior to creation, or you could say what existed of the flow of energy prior to creation, and then the thought of creation, and then into where we live now. The idea is that we are to receive, we're intended to receive everything, infinitely. Okay, we'll get into what that means a little bit more later, but that's the word Kabbalah. The study of Kabbalah is the, you could call it the fourth and final branch of the basic pattern of study, which is the sod, the secrets of the wisdom. And I have a handout here that some people grabbed. You're welcome to grab a copy if you want after class. And what we talked about was some of the wisdom shared by major sages over the past 400 to 500 years, explaining why not only is there no longer a restriction on the study of Kabbalah, but there's an insistence that you must study Kabbalah. Without the knowledge of Kabbalah, without the secrets, without the spiritual elements of the study of the wisdom given to us, let's say by God, we'll say that for now. We'll get into that more later. But without that, your study is incomplete. And one Kabbalist in particular compared those people who didn't study Kabbalah to beasts who had no taste, like a horse that would eat hay. And one of them in particular went actually through dates to explain why it is that at one point in time the study of Kabbalah was legitimately restricted, and again, why not only is it no longer restricted, and all of those dates have long since expired, hundreds of years ago, but again, it's demanded of us to complete the picture that we have to study Kabbalah. We talked about the study of creation according to Kabbalah. That prior to creation there was this element, this energy force that was one of infinite giving, had no ability to receive, and so therefore it created a vessel by which to receive. So in order for somebody, for an entity that's infinitely receiving, to have something, for an energy that is infinitely sharing, to have something to receive, that thing that's receiving has to be able to infinitely receive. So you have a pattern of infinite sharing and infinite receiving. And at some point, this element of infinite receiving said, there's a problem here, there's a disconnect here. This aspect of infinite sharing are creating a problem for me. I want to be like you. You are my creator, so to speak. You are the one who's giving to me, but I have no ability to give back to you. And I'm asking you to stop what you're doing, stop giving to me, because I can't receive this way from you. I can't receive in a manner that makes me the polar opposite of you. You're infinite good. You are infinite mercy. You are infinite energy. You are infinite giving. And I'm sitting over here and all I'm doing is taking. And I can't do it anymore. So that was the stop. That was the end of that non-physical process before time, before space, before motion existed. And shortly after that is basically when our physical universe came into being. And then we get into the story of the Garden of Eden, which is almost like a physical repeat of the same story. The Garden of Eden started off in what we'll call infinite bliss. And that deteriorated with the appearance of the snake and eating from the tree of knowledge. Again, all the details of which we'll get into again later. But that's the basic idea. Now, when all that happened, this aspect of infinite sharing didn't change. It can't change. Now, that aspect is not God. We use the term the light. It's a very common term that the Zohar uses to describe it. It's not exactly God, but it is all of the characteristics that represent God. It's all of the mercy. It's all of the giving. It's all of the sharing. It's all the kindness, all goodness. We compared it a little bit to the light of a light bulb, of a lamp last week. And we talked about how that became clouded over time through actions that we took that weren't congruent with the way the light is trying to share with us. But I'll use another example. The sun. Okay, so when we think of the sun is about as close, I think, as most of us can imagine to infinite giving and something that doesn't change. So when the sun is beaming its light down upon us all day long, we have choices to make about how we're going to behave with the sun. So if I plant seeds in the ground and I water them nicely and the sun helps them grow, is the sun good? And you don't have to answer that, but just think about it for a minute when I ask you the next question. If I go outside in a hot summer day and I don't put suntan lotion on and I burn, is the sun bad? So the sun is neither good nor bad. The sun is, again, I'm going to say it's infinite light. It's not quite the same. I'll use a lowercase l instead of an uppercase L, but that's about as close as we can imagine in our physical world. Okay, so it's just giving. It never goes away. Even when we're on the other side of the planet from the sun, it's still giving. We don't see it, but it's still there. Okay? It was actually interesting. For those of you who were here this past Shabbat, Rabbi Wein had a fabulous drasha. He was talking about the portion of the week, Vayera. He was talking about Avram Avinu and how Avram greeted guests at his doorway. He greeted these three people / angels, and I kind of joked with him later. I said, you kind of ruined my first few classes of Kabbalah, but that's a good thing. Partly because it shows you that what I was saying before is true, that Kabbalah is an essential part of everything, and because the topic was amazing. His topic was, in brief, so imagine this scene. Avraham Avinu is standing at the entrance to his tent. This is the third day after the Brit Milah, and as the commentaries explain, it's the most painful day after the Brit Milah. And the way Rabbi Wein explained it is, it was more painful for Avram to sit in his bed doing nothing than it was for him to be out and about and waiting to receive guests. Okay? So he's at the entrance, and he's having a conversation with God, like Avram Avinu did many, many times. And at some point he says, "Oh, God, hold on a second. I'll be right back. I see 3 guests in the distance. I'm going to go greet them and welcome them and serve them food and, wash their feet, etc., etc." So he says to Hashem, "Hold on. I'll be right back with you." Could you imagine putting God on hold? But that's what he's doing. Avram Avinu is putting God on hold. And he's the one we look up to as our example. And we look to him as our example of mercy, of kindness. And he's really the forefather, not just of the Jewish people, but of basically all nations around the world. He has that element in him that understands that it's not enough to speak with God. Whatever you want to call that. You want to call that your prayers. You want to call that your meditation. That's the speaking with God. It's the actions that count. It's the getting out there. It's being like God. What do we mean by being like God? In the aspect of Kabbalah, we mean like the vessel decided, I can't do this anymore. I can't be receiving. I need to be like you. I need to be sharing. I need to be giving. I need to have mercy in my life the way you have mercy that you're giving to me. Okay? So, we talked about how the original thought of creation was a phrase that the Kabbalists say, lehativ lenivra'av, which means for the benefit of that which was created, or his creations. And that's it. That's the entire thought of creation, is that we'll all benefit infinitely. That's it. That's the thought of creation, and that exists this very day. So I asked everybody to think for a minute about, how close do you think you are to that idea of receiving infinite goodness and being in a frame of mind that, wow, everything I'm getting all the time, every day from every person is good. How close are we to any of that? And if we're not right up there all the time, then why? And the why is really the reason for the study of Kabbalah. It's the reason for the study of everything. The reason for the study of the Torah, of the Talmud, of the Zohar, of the Kabbalah, of our interactions with everyone around us, of our prayers, of our conversations with our rabbis, our family members. It's the reason for all of it. That whole thing revolves around the idea of getting to a place of understanding how everything around us is good. And the challenges that keep us from being able to get there. Yeah?
Wouldn't it? The fact that, that the restriction was placed that, you could only study Kabbalah at a certain point. You couldn't just...
You're talking about this restriction we talked about some hundreds of years ago, or you mean that it expired at some point?
No.
Okay.
The fact that, it was said you couldn't study this up until a certain point. But wouldn't it make sense to more have a better understanding of the Torah before attempting to study Kabbalah?
So the way I understand this is that the sages who identify this expiration date, so to speak, of those restrictions, were coming from basically two places. Number one, they were coming from a place of a enlightenment or re-enlightenment of the world. I mean, if you look at stories from things like the Crusades, of the Middle Ages, these are, you can't imagine that human beings treated each other this way. There was, let's say a lack of not just humanity, but any feeling or understanding that we're connected in any way. People were just unable to fathom that. So there was an aspect that people were not people. And when I say people, I mean the masses. Yes, there were individuals. There were individuals throughout time who were always able to understand this information. But in terms of the masses, there was an understanding that people were not enlightened enough to understand it. So you look at people today, most people won't hesitate to at least give some credence to the idea of meditation. They'll accept that idea, that meditation has a net positive effect on us. That's a relatively modern idea. People were not enlightened to those concepts. So that was one aspect of what I understand of why it was restricted. Now, the other aspect of it, which we're going to talk about a little bit more as we get to the role of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and the revelation of the Zohar and some of the other texts that came along after it, is that this wisdom does need to be protected. It did, I'll say it did need to be protected. Certainly much more so than it needs to be protected now. Just like we talked about that the sun is not inherently good or bad, but there are good and bad things that can be done with it, the same can be true of the wisdom of Kabbalah. And the deeper we get into it, the more you'll see that there are opportunities to take the wisdom and the things that are said and to manipulate them in a way that can create a very damaging and negative effect on not just an individual people, but on masses of people. And I think many of us can probably call out examples in current day where somebody's manipulating the truth in a certain way. They're not lying, but they're using something to an advantage that creates a great deal of negativity. And the wisdom of the Zohar and the wisdom of Kabbalah and these secrets, they do have that possibility. I think a lot of that's been diminished. Again, that's the way I've understood the sages say it, that the possibility of the bad has been diminished. At the same time, the possibility of the good has been diminished. There's so much more effort that's needed by us these days in order to create high levels of goodness. And that same thing is true of the badness, so to speak. But that same wisdom can be used for both. Yeah.
Just because we're kind of in the beginning, I think it's kind of important to know the purpose. So if we arrive to a point in which we have a tikkun, okay, which everything is good, everybody is getting where we're trying to get. So does that mean that the phase that we're in now, the physical phase, will cease to exist because that's the purpose of the physical now, that all the challenges we have in order to get to a tikkun? What does it mean, in other words, to get to that Yom HaYeshua, no, the day of redemption? What is it, the day of the Mashiach? What will happen?
Okay.
Why?
So let's save the details of what will happen at the coming of Mashiach for another time. But we can speak briefly about tikkun. So tikkun, the literal meaning is correction, and from a soul level, from the aspect of the godly part that resides within each one of us, we each came to this world to correct something, to fix something about ourselves, or to assist somebody else in their process of fixing something. It can be different for men or for women. It can be different for children. There's many, many different aspects that, again, I don't want to go into too much. We'll talk about that maybe during a class of reincarnation. But if you think about a timeline, all the souls created from the beginning of time, from this beginning of creation until now, okay, there's been a great deal of correction that would have had to have taken place, which means there's not so much left. There just simply can't be. There can't be so much left in a given timeline, right? You've got, many maybe have heard this concept that we've got 6,000 years, so to speak, to play this game. And we're at 5778. So there's a little bit over 200 years left. We're like approaching dusk of, Erev Shabbat. That's like where we're at right now. So how much more can there be? Well, if there's more, for some of us, it means it's the sensitivity is very, very much heightened because there's no time. You got to correct, and before those days come. On the other hand, if you have made the appropriate corrections over the past 57 or 78 years, there's something very, very specific that you came back to correct. Some people even say that's why people live so long these days, so long compared to how long they used to. Not going back to the beginning of time, that's another story. But over the past, let's say, 2,000 to 3,000 years, obviously life has gotten much, much longer. And it's because people have, one of the explanations from a spiritual standpoint is that people have one or two very specific things that they just have to correct. There's no more time. There's no more time to get to it. So that's just a brief introduction of the concept of tikkun and correction and the purpose that we came here for. But there's still some basics that we have to visit before we get back to that. So I want to try and cover a few more of those, which I think I'm going to get to very shortly here. We talked about that there was the sin in the Garden of Eden as we began to, so to speak, fail our mission of receiving infinite goodness. The light force of the Creator had to be concealed in different ways. So one of the ways it's concealed is through this process of the Eser Sfirot, or the Tree of Life, or the 10 dimensions. We represent the lowest dimension, the dimension of Malchut, the kingship, the physical world. And the light is hidden in different aspects throughout the other 9 dimensions. And then an aspect of that light is also hidden within each one of us. And that's why it's our job to help reveal that light for ourselves and the light within each other by behaving like the light. I mean, it's just kind of logic. It flows from there. Yeah?
Why do we not call the light Hashem?
So there's a couple reasons I think why. One reason in particular, again, why the Zohar, I think, calls it the light. Normally when it calls it the light, it's talking about the attributes of God rather than God itself. So God is something that's, I guess, let's say, incomprehensible, but we see God throughout our day if we open our eyes to it. So again, somebody like Rabbi Wein might say, everything that happens during the day, we need to have gratitude about that. Everything good that happens with us, even everything quote unquote bad, we need to have gratitude. Well, that's seeing God. That's seeing light. That's seeing the light force of the Creator being manifest in our lives. So that's what we're really seeing. We're really seeing the light in one way of seeing things. And I think a lot of the Kabbalists over the years use the term the light just to avoid, honestly, an overly religious connotation. When you use God, many people walk into a room and they have their preconceived notion of what God is. For some people, God may be the one who didn't protect their family during the Holocaust. For some people, God may be the one that helped their family win the lottery. For some people, God may be the one that healed their family from cancer. But for other people, and God may even represent for you something completely different because you didn't grow up in a Jewish environment at all. Maybe you were born Muslim or Christian or whatever. Yeah?
Is that the same light that people have near-death experiences they're talking about?
I don't know. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure when they use the term the light if they're also talking about a physical / spiritual light. I'm really not sure. I don't know if that's the same, if that's what they're trying to convey or not. Yeah.
Could the light be considered to be like an energy force, and that is what was responsible for creation?
Yeah.
Simplification.
It's an energy force. I mean, I do think that's whether that's what's responsible for creation. I mean, I think part of the story of creation is understanding that we're the ones actually responsible for creation. We're the ones who chose. We represent the vessel. We don't represent the light. We represent the aspect that was being given to. So it was our collective choice, all 7 billion plus of us, to say, again, in a representation of a single entity at some point in the past, or before time even existed, it was our choice to say, this isn't working for me. This relationship is too one-sided. And in just a minute, we're going to get to a little bit more about what that one-sidedness is. But it's an important concept to understand. We're the ones who chose to be here. We are why creation had to happen. Again, the thought of creation came from the light, saying, my desire and my only ability is to give infinitely. That's my only ability. So, of course, your job is to benefit from my giving. That's really your only job. But we're the ones who decided this is how, if that's what you want from me, if you want me to receive your infinite goodness, then it can't happen this way. It can't be just from you infinitely giving and me being unable to give back. Can't do it. Got to stop that. Got to find a new way. Okay, let's create the physical universe. That's how it's going to happen.
But wouldn't the purpose of the physical universe be to receive?
Yes, it's also to receive. And we'll get to that as well, okay? It's to receive in a slightly different way. It's just a little twist or a few little twists that make all the difference.
So like when we do good things for each other, like, is that kind of like giving back to God?
Sort of, and I hope we'll
back to the light.
Right. I hope we'll get to that. I hope we will. I hope we'll begin to feel that by the end of the class. That we'll each kind of personally have a sense of that. We spoke briefly about the idea of free will, because people talk a lot of times about, do we have free will in this world? And that's many people's objection, so to speak, with organized religion. They'll say, well, if God's all-knowing and all-powerful and all, then what am I doing here? There's just really no purpose for me to exist or for me to pray or for me to whatever, because I don't have free will anyway, so what's the point? Again, it's one objection. So we talked about the idea that from a Kabbalistic perspective, the idea of free will is not the same as the idea of freedom. Freedom is being out of prison versus being in prison. Free will is being Joseph the righteous in prison and deciding, am I going to be imprisoned by my situation, or am I going to realize that everything is for the good, and that not only am I going to come out of this better than I was before, but I'm going to be the king's right-hand man, and I'm going to feed my whole family, when they come to Egypt, and I'm going to save my brother, and I'm going to see my father again, and on and on and on. Which way am I going to behave? And that is an opportunity that all of us have all the time. Our free will at any given situation is, how will I react? Will I react knowing that I'm a creation of God and that there's no good and bad, but there's actually only my reaction that creates good or bad? Or am I going to give in altogether and say, forget it, this isn't for me. This life isn't for me. I'm going to do what I want to do. And those two concepts, freedom and free will, are often confused, and we don't want to confuse those here. That's going to be a recurring theme. Free will, free will, free will. Choice to react or choice to proact, so to speak. To understand that the good or the bad is up to me. Okay. So we were starting, towards the end of the class, we were starting to talk about this idea of, okay, so now we're here. Now we're all sitting here. It's 2017. What am I supposed to do with my life? Where am I at? What's going on? Okay. So one of the aspects that changed when we moved from a non-physical world to a physical world was the idea of having an opportunity to earn what was previously given to me freely. So this infinite force was just giving. It was all out there for the taking. That's no longer the case. The creation of the physical world, as we talked about a little bit before, caused a concealment of the light force of the Creator in such a way that I now have to earn it. Now, when I receive it without earning it, which is possible, and we'll talk about that as well, it results in what the Kabbalists call bread of shame. And this is something that will be a recurring theme as well. Bread of shame is the idea of receiving without earning. So if you want to think about it in the physical sense, you can imagine that you've got maybe a friend who they always treat you to dinner. They're always the one inviting you over for a meal. They refuse to accept your invite. This is not the person who just likes to invite you more, but you don't have them as much. This is the person who refuses to accept anything back from you. You try and give them a gift, they'll sneak it in your bag before you walk back out the door, and you end up back home. You're like, oh, the bottle of wine I brought them is back with me. How'd that happen? Because they just won't take anything from you. And for most people, that will make them feel miserable. It won't take long before they just won't be able to handle it anymore. And they'll begin to resent that friend, and they may not even consider them a friend anymore. So I don't know how many people can think of a situation where that's actually happened to them, but if you explore the idea in your head of somebody who's only giving to you, it sounds so good at first, but if you really delve into it, you'll realize that it creates a blockage, it creates a barrier, and that barrier is referred to as bread of shame. And again, it will come up a lot. And when you're bread of shame, another way to look at it is you're being the vessel. Now, a vessel by itself doesn't necessarily have a bad connotation. Again, that's what we were in the infinite world before we were created. We were the vessel. We are all little pieces of the vessel. But when you're behaving like vessel, all you're doing is receiving. You're taking. You're giving, I'm taking. You want to give me more, I'll take more. I don't have any, I'm not giving back. There's nothing to back. So what happens with a vessel that's just taking? If I took a pitcher of water and I poured it into this cup and I pour into the cup, exactly, it's going to overflow. Now, what if instead of that, I put a little hole in the bottom of the cup and I put another cup underneath it? And the bottom, in that cup, I put another hole. And I have a cup underneath that and another hole. And this goes on for 7 billion vessels and holes stretching. It has the ability, more or less, to share infinitely. So there's nothing bad about the vessel itself. But when I'm behaving like vessel, it means that I'm taking without giving anything back. Yeah.
But if you put a hole in the bottom, that doesn't go back. It goes to others.
But that pitcher is still pouring. Imagine that pitcher is infinitely full.
Yeah.
Imagine that pitcher of water. It's there's no end to the amount of water that's coming out of that pitcher. So if I reach this point and I poke a hole in it and it's coming infinitely, it's going to stay at that level. It's going to stay full, and so is everything else downstream of it. Maybe it's a little bit hard to, again, imagine physically, but that's the idea. The idea is that I can receive and share at the same time without what I'm getting being diminished. Because there's always more. There's always more. Okay, when I behave like vessel, I'm saying, if I give something away, there's nothing to replace it. I'm losing. I'm being diminished. I'm being shrunk. This
is not a matter of giving back to who gave to you. It's a matter of you giving to
That's right, and
somebody.
in fact that remains impossible.
Okay.
So the idea of giving back to the Creator, giving back to the infinite source, it remains impossible even in the physical world. What's possible is to give to His other creations. What's possible is to eliminate the bread of shame that's within me, to eliminate the behaving like vessel. I'm Avram Avinu, I'm standing at the tent, at the entrance to the tent. God is just telling me stuff. That sounds amazing. I'm having a conversation with God. That sounds amazing. But I'm being vessel. There's an opportunity for me to be like God. There's an opportunity for me to behave like the light. I'm out of here. See ya. That. And I'm not losing anything. Not only am I not losing anything, but my wife is going to have a baby at 90 years old. That's interesting. It's an interesting revelation. Not only am I not losing, but again, through the infinite mercy and kindness and giving of the light, I can receive more than I could ever imagine. More than any of us could ever imagine. When you're behaving like vessel, your vessel has the ability to overflow, and you plug it up. You can't get any more in there. So how do you get more? You have to grow your vessel. You have to increase the size of your vessel. So the way you increase the size of your vessel is you resist the temptations of bread of shame, of receiving without earning. So we talked a little bit about this idea last week, and I'm going to expand on it a little bit more, that the thought of creation, this energy force was an infinite energy force, and we were an infinite vessel to receive. And now we've been shattered into 7 billion pieces that are all still vessels that we want to continue to create this pattern of flow of receiving and sharing. So, but the idea is that we're supposed to, these little twists, these overcoming bread of shame, overcoming the feeling of receiving without sharing as well, of recognizing the light that's been concealed within each one of us. But the idea is to get back to the infinite. How do you get back to infinite? How is that possible? So, I want to shake Nancy's hand I want to go down and pick something up from her. I think I can get to Nancy, right? I want to go meet a friend in New York. I can choose to drive. I can take an airplane. I can get on the train. I want to go to the moon. That's pretty cool. I could take a rocket ship and go to the moon. How do I get back to infinite? So the truth, as we described last week, is that it's not possible. It's not possible to get back to infinite. So there has to be something else going on here. So there's a story of a poor man who prayed to God every day to help him. Help me, please. Help me provide for my family. Help me to understand, what it is I'm supposed to do to create goodness in this world. Please help me, help me, help me. And one day, the voice of God came down to him and said, I'll help you. I will give you the financial sustenance to build a house and to provide for your family and to help your children learn and. But I have a deal for you. I'm going to plant a big rock in the front of your yard, and every day you have to push on it. That's what you have to do. So, you can imagine, they find the plot of land, they build the house, and there it is, this big stone that he knows that's his place. He's going to have to push on it. And the first day he gets out there, and 23 hours and 59 minutes, he's pushing on that stone with everything he's got. I mean, he's just pushing as hard as he can. And the next day he's out there, and it's almost the same. And over the course of days and weeks, he's just pushing and pushing. And as the years go by, slowly he's pushing less and less and less and less. And then one day, it starts just kind of boop. Every day it just boop. And finally, he just stops altogether. And relatively quickly, he loses all of his wealth and all the sustenance that he had and all the ability to provide. And he cries out to Hashem, why did you take from me? And Hashem's voice comes down to him and says, why did you stop pushing on the stone? And he said, because it never moved anywhere. And God's voice said, who said you had to move it? And that's really the point of our lives, so to speak. It's not our job to move the stone. It's our job to push on the stone. Now that may bother some of you. Like you may look at that and you may say, hold on. So doing the effort, that's enough? All I got to do is the effort? Well, I think if you really give it some thought and you think about some of the experiences you've had in your own life, you'll probably realize that that's not really the way it ends up working. So I'll give you an example for me. So I remember some years ago, I had an opportunity to spend Shabbat in Tzfat with a large group. I was very fortunate. I was already working in the area. I was even in the north. So, most people in Israel don't even work on Friday. So I was able to get to Tzfat early in the day, visit the tzaddikim, go to different things, help even set up a little bit. But most of the people were coming from much, much further. They were either coming from the south, from areas like Beersheba, or south of Tel Aviv, and they had long drives, and there's a lot of traffic on Friday. And one friend in particular, he called me up, and he was carpooling with several other people, so the timing wasn't up to him. And he's telling me he's suffering from this horrible headache. It's pounding in his head, and he knows when he gets these, he needs this particular pill. And he tells me the name of the pill, and he tells me the different pharmacies that sell it. And I get in my car, and it's an hour or two before Shabbat, and he's already, he's on the road. He's getting close. And I'm going everywhere. Half the pharmacies are already closed, because that's a pretty religious area there. The ones I do find, nobody's ever heard of this thing. And I spent until like the last 5 or 10 minutes that I could looking for it, and I didn't find it. And I get back to the house, and I'm like, in my head, I've kind of got excuses like, did I do everything I could? Did I work as hard as I could to find a way to help? And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to explain to my friend that I couldn't do it. How? How could it be? I had 2 hours to get this mission done. I couldn't do it. He walks in the door. He's happy. He's smiling. He's good. I'm like, what? I'm so sorry. I couldn't. He said, you can't believe the miracle. I open my bag, there's a pill. It's impossible. It couldn't have been there. We all looked for it. We all went through every compartment of every bag I had. And that's how you know that it's working. It rarely happens in the way you think it's going to happen. That's the way of the light, and that's the way it has to be. And I'll go back to the idea of free will. So let's just say that the punishment if you steal something is they take your hand and they chop it off. Okay, that's what happens. Okay, or you share with somebody and immediately $500 appears in your bank account. Okay, either side, the good side, the bad side, doesn't matter. Okay, is that free will anymore? Do you really think you have free will to behave how you want to behave when punishment and reward is instantaneous and is exactly the way that you expect it to be? Right? Can you think about that idea? Think about the idea that because that's really what this world is about, right? This world is about choosing how to behave in a way that brings the most goodness to our lives and avoiding the things that brings bad to our lives. And yet most of us are sitting there scratching our head like, man, I was so good to that person. I helped him out so much, and he acted like a jerk to me. Or saying, I can't believe, how mean I was, how selfish I was, but my dad just keeps on writing those checks, keeps on helping me out, whatever it is, right? It doesn't work the way we think it does because it can't work the way we think it does. If it worked the way we thought it would, there would not be the ability for free will. Okay? And we have to see that that is the way of the world and that is the way of the light. So really the initial stages of thinking about the study of Kabbalah should help to begin to open you up a little bit, to help you see in any given situation that good and bad don't exist in the ways that we like to think they do, or the ways that we saw it in the past. That free will or freedom, or whatever you want to call it in any given situation, is not what we once thought it would, what we once thought it was. The way that somebody's behaving with us or towards us is not what we think. When we think that somebody's being mean to us, so to speak, doesn't necessarily mean that they're being mean to us. And again, we'll delve into that deeper, but just at the beginning stages of the study of Kabbalah, we want to start opening ourselves to the idea that there are all kinds of things going on in the non-physical world, in the spiritual world, that are reflected into our world in order to give us this idea of free will, this idea of overcoming bread of shame, this idea of earning that which was previously given to us for free, this idea to be light and to not be vessel. Okay, that everything that's around us, everything that we perceive, we now have the ability to begin to shift it from the pshat, from the simplest interpretation, or simplest translation, the simplest meaning, all the way to the sod, all the way to the secrets, to the non-physical, to the spiritual. That's what the study of Kabbalah gives us the ability to do. And in fact, all the things that happened over the last 5,700, almost 5,800 years, like the flood, and then the 7 laws, B'nai Noach, and then Avram Avinu, and Yitzchak and Yaakov, and everything happening as slaves in Egypt, and then the giving of the Torah, and then the writing of the Talmud, and all the writings of the Rishonim that came after that, and the knowledge of published versions of the Zohar that we can read. All those things happen. All the halachot, as we speak about them, right? We a lot of times we refer to this idea of a halacha, and halacha most of us translate as being a rule, but halacha comes from the source of holech. Holech meaning like to walk, or a path, a derech. If we want to say rule, there's another word for that. So these are not rules in the sense of things you have to do, but rather these are rules to keep you on the path, to keep you spiritually driven towards a stronger relationship with Hashem, with a stronger relationship of the aspect of Hashem that's within each one of us. And for that matter, even the aspect of Hashem that's within all of the inanimate things that are around us. How we behave with the earth, how we behave with the chair. I can get mad at this chair because, I'm uncomfortable and throw it across the room if I want. There's an aspect of God that's in this chair. This chair didn't come by magically. You can trace everything you see somewhere back to an aspect of the light. Okay, a person made this chair, but the chair was made from the tree, and the tree was planted by another person, and that person, it all goes back, it all traces back to the light. And the more we see that, the more we see how things trace back, the more we have an opportunity to see that all these laws and restrictions and halachot and observances of the Shabbat and of Kashrut and of all these things are really just our guides to help us visualize and feel and see how we can be beings of sharing, beings of light, becoming more like God. That's what they're there for.
I have a question.
Sure.
Why the Kabbalah is called secrets, and why is it secrets?
Okay, so the way that I would understand this related to some of the things we talked about before. So secrets in this sense mostly means non-physical. Non-physical. Okay, that's most of the time when we say secrets, or we use the term spirituality. People like to use that word a lot these days. They like to use the word spirituality. What does spirituality really mean? It means it's something you can't measure. You can't weigh it. You can't check how long it is. You can't hold it in your hand. Right? You can, but you can't. Like, we can't touch love. I can't tell you whether I love my wife more or my wife loves me more. I can't grasp that. There are ways that it's manifest in the world, but I can't really hold on to it and measure it. And therefore, there's an aspect of spirituality to that. And the sod, the secrets, what they're attempting to do is to explain what's happening in the upper world that is being reflected into our world. So I think is it Shlomo HaMelech who says that there's nothing new under the sun. I think this is a saying that he's famous for, right? So what does it mean if there's nothing new under the sun? What he's saying is that everything that's in our physical world, it's not new. There's nothing to it. It's a reflection of what's in the spiritual world. That's all it is. We're a mirror. We're a mirror for what's happening in the non-physical world, in the sfirot that are above Malchut, in Keter through Yisod, which again is something we'll talk about more, the other 9 dimensions. And this is what Rabbi Shimon and what the Ari and what the Baal Shem Tov and what these other individuals, people, if you want to call them that, sages, wanted to bring to us. They wanted to bring to us that there is a secret world above us where all these things are happening. So when I say to you, would it be free will if my hand was chopped off when I stole something? Of course, the answer would be no. Well, but in the secret is my hand is being chopped off. When I steal something, my hand just got chopped off. It just got chopped off in the non-physical world, in the spiritual world. And that hurts. And that's, if you really connect to that idea, it can hurt you so bad that it can drive you crazy. And those were the reasons for many, many of the restrictions for hundreds, if not thousands of years in the study of Kabbalah, because the more you put yourself in the non-physical world, the more you have the potential to release yourself from the physical world and to become a little crazy, a little cuckoo. So the biggest role of the sages, and something we'll learn about Rabbi Shimon in particular, was one of the things that made him great is he was able to live in both worlds at the same time. Okay? Able to live in the non-physical and the physical world at the same time.
Without going crazy.
So, let me see if I can get this right. So it seems to me like you're saying that God, does God punish also as well? Or it's always good, like giving?
So the best way to really think about it, even we always describe God as a being of infinite goodness or of giving with infinite mercy. And on the one hand, that's true. Okay? But on the other hand, it's almost better to see it as it's neither one. What's being given to us is infinite in terms of its energy. What we do with it is what causes it to be good or bad. And it can be good or bad for an individual.
So it seems to me like it seems to me like you're saying that I read somewhere else with like the light of the sun doesn't know whether it's good or bad. So you're saying to me like God has there's no conscience. It's just like an energy. And it's what you do with it. Is that what you're saying? Because to me, God is like kind of like another person to me.
Right.
It's
Right.
conscience.
And
It's someone that I talk to,
And that's why, again, at least the way that I've studied and the way I've learned from other people, that's why it can be good to use a distinction between God and the light. It can be good to just create a very small distinction in your mind and say, God is something that's so infinite and undefinable, I'm almost not going to refer to it. But the light that comes from God, that is the manifestation of God, that has all the attributes of God, that I'll talk about a little bit more. And right, that light never changes. It doesn't have the ability to change, just like you were saying, the light from the sun, it doesn't have the ability to decide, I'm going to punish that guy with a sunburn, and I'm going to reward that person with a beautiful garden. It doesn't have that in its power to choose. It only has the ability to give. That's all it has, is the ability to give. It's a one-way street. And even when we...
Depends how we look at it, the way we think.
That's right. So that's the idea of having free will. I can choose to look at the sun as, why are you beating down on me at 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle of summer when I have to be outside working today? Or I can choose to look at it and say, this is amazing that the sun is beating down. It's going to help my garden grow. It's going to help feed the world. It's going to.
It's all in here.
That's right.
If
That
you
is our
think
free will.
Good things, and you are optimistic, then good things happen to you.
And the idea of good things happening to you is involved with many, many, many other things. It seems like a wonderful idea to look at this and say, oh, if I just see that every day, only good things will happen to me. But we all know that's not really
At the moment.
what happens. In any given moment, right, most of us can create happiness for ourselves in any given moment just by having appreciation or gratitude. Again, this is something that Rabbi Wein goes back to. When you're having a hard time, have gratitude. When you're struggling, to get above yourself, when you're sad, go share with somebody. Behave like the light. Stop being like vessel and start behaving like the light. I heard one time, it may sound very crass to some of you, and I'm sorry if it does, but I heard a psychiatrist one time talking about this idea. What's the stereotypical line that you hear somebody write in their suicide note? I just couldn't take it anymore. That's the stereotype. I just couldn't take it anymore. Well, sure you couldn't take it anymore. That's all you did was take. And again, the last thing I ever want to do is create a stigmatism about receiving medical care or to say that suicide is, not a serious issue that should be dealt with and that there aren't people with mental issues that need to seek that care. I don't want to belittle any of that. But the basic aspect of any of us being in a depressive mode is I'm taking, I'm receiving, I'm in a situation of bread of shame, I'm behaving like vessel. That can be, again, in the most minor, I'm not feeling very good for the next 5 minutes, or that can be I've been suffering for the past 5 years. Either one is possible. I think that's a lot of information for one night. I'd love to continue. I have more things on my introductory list still to go through, but I don't want to overwhelm anyone. We'll pick it up again next week.
Tell us
About
about yourself.
myself?
We don't know you, where you're from.
Sure. Okay. If you'd like to stay around for a few more minutes, I'd be happy to share that. I also just want to let anybody know who wants to. These are, it's not exactly a handout. It's just if anybody wants a copy, I printed out a few sheets
Wonderful.
that talk about some of the things that sages over the past 500 years have shared about why the study of Kabbalah is so essential. Okay, I'll stop.